Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is on the forensic psych topic of attachment disorder and the role it plays in criminal behaviors.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. Here's to resilience, recovery, rejuvenation during 2025. Dr. Shiloh, are you ready for the year of the snake? I looked you up, and Chinese horoscopes say that those that are born in the year of the horse will do well in the year of the upcoming snake, the wood snake, I believe. So you'll have a bright financial year with married couples possibly welcoming a new child and a good chance of getting a promotion. How do those sound?
That's not the kind of snake I'm looking for. No, why would you say that? Well, both those things are wrong. I am off to spending way too much money this year. I will be eating top ramen for the rest of 2025. Ooh. No, that's cool. So what's in it for you? What does it say for the tiger?
I used to what was it? I got the horoscope wrong years ago and thought I'm born in the year of the tiger.
Right.
But I was supposed to be I thought I was a metal tiger, which is one of my email names. And then I found out, no, I'm a water tiger. I don't know. It's
lame.
All a bunch of gobbledygook, but it's supposed to be a good year for me.
Oh, good. Okay.
And I tend to do better in odd years. So I don't know.
This is it. This is your year.
It's the little pillow of delusion I sleep on every night.
I know. And then sometimes you roll over and Mercury retrograde is right there in your side.
Damn it. That's why everything's going wrong.
I got Dr. Scott a Christmas ornament this year that says, What does it say?
Blame it on Mercury retrograde.
Blame it on Mercury retrograde. Yep.
It's made of heavy cast metal, so I could use it as knuckles if I wanted to, brass knuckles.
You have to hang it at the very top of the tree where those really stiff branches are. Well, with that, should we take a moment to talk about how 2025 will look for LA Not So Confidential?
Yes, absolutely. Big changes.
So moving forward, starting with today, you will get one new forensic psych related episode. And then the second episode of the month is going to be our behind the couch session from either the previous month or the current month. We'll let you know at the end of this episode what's coming up. And it just kind of depends on the time of recording because we work with our guests to kind of fit their schedule. So we don't know exactly, which week we end up talking to them live, but that will be what is coming your way. So still 2 episodes a month with the occasional bonus or 2-parter. When the inspiration hits us, you can still catch Behind the Couch live streams, live, if you follow our YouTube channel or social media. So make sure you are plugged into those to know when they come up live, if that is your jam to watch it. But for those of you who prefer to listen only, it will be in your regular feed. So for instance, very recently, some people had missed that JonBenet discussion live stream that I did with Rebecca Sebastian in 2021. And we just put it out a week ago and people were really glad to catch it and hear it and had totally missed it. So I think, this lends to also, what about our Patreon members? You are still going to get everything early and ad-free. Plus you're going to get those extra shrink wrap sessions that Scott and I do. And hopefully one or both of us will do some more of those Discord voice channels, which is really a video channel. If you're at the intern or doctoral levels, you can catch those. I played around with that last month too, just kind of impromptu, told everybody I was jumping on in an hour or so and had some folks join. And it was kind of cool. We did more JonBenet after documentary debriefs. So it's really nice to get on there and chat every once in a while. So again, as we've said before, just because we are slowing down, professionally, some things have changed. I am now on a state board for hostage and crisis negotiations for the next 2 years. We have to ebb and flow with our bandwidth.
Yeah, same thing for me. My position has changed to working still within legal system in a forensic capacity, but doing more court work and being a subject matter expert. So it's a radical shift, but one also that I'm really excited about sort of getting the neurons crackling again. I think
totally
shifting and change is good for everybody. And this is one of them. And I'm so unbelievably grateful for the experience of the last 7.5 years that I had working in tandem with law enforcement. It's been just an eye opener. And, I've been able to put my foot into a world and get some real respect and really achieve some accomplishments that I never had even dreamed of a decade ago, which was really great.
Absolutely. We're all proud of you. Keep us posted.
Oh, thank you. And I would also just want to add to the discussion about our Patreon channel is that I won't speak for you, Dr. Shiloh. I'll speak for myself.
Okay.
But when I'm on, there is a little bit more of freedom in how I can engage. And I'm a little, you think I'm opinionated on the podcast. I'm a lot more direct in it on the Patreon. So I think that gives our listeners at that level a little bit of a more expanded experience of
Sure.
the work that we do and our perspective on things. So join us over there if you want to, even at the lowest level. We always appreciate and are still just very, very grateful to have our Patreon going. And thank you all for supporting us for all these years and, going with this as we continually shift to kind of make adjustments for both of us working slightly, if not majorly, over a regular 40-hour week.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So let me just jump into a recap of last episode. For the last couple of weeks, we dropped special bits, included Dr. Shiloh and the brilliant Rebecca Sebastian of Dialogue on the topic of Jean-Benet Ramsey from 2021. And like you said, wow, I mean, like it's 3.5 years ago that you guys recorded that. And now it's back in the news with a lot of controversy, a lot of discussion, and also just as much like bullshit flying back and forth as there was back in the day. So
Always.
I think that this was like a really great grounding little footnote to put in and sort of reorient our listeners to it. And then we also were able to add our live show from the Berkshires Podcast Festival and our most recent episode on the intersection of the Delphi murder trial, along with the topic of digital ethics in our profession. I know it sounds like a wild combination.
Right.
We got a lot of responses from that episode that will probably end up generating a shrink wrap stream to address many of the questions.
Good idea.
Again, please join us over on Patreon for more of that discussion. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, highly, highly recommend it. I tried to control my soapbox, but it's another example of when someone just goes off the rail in our profession, something that really Dr. Shiloh and I just at this point, we have to contain our rage and just like roll our eyes that these things happen, right?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What are you going to do? We can talk about it. We can discuss it in ways that pertain to our tradecraft when it comes to ethics and guidelines and just help people understand that. So I think it was a little mix of both. Definitely not rage. There was not rage there. But
oh, well, on you. I mean, like I have.
Not you either.
Like I have a raging kitten inside me. There you go. So with all of that, Dr. Shiloh, what do Richard Ramirez, Ted Bundy, Henry Lee Lucas, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Eileen Wuornos all have in common? I mean, aside from the fact that they are recycled over and over and over again in the true crime environment, besides the obvious to any devotee of the subject of true crime, what do they have in common?
I mean, I don't know. That really doesn't narrow it down.
True, but because we've been asked for the past few years to focus on today's topic, we should drill down into one of the fundamental aspects, the nurture aspect of personality development. Nature versus nurture. Today, we're really going to be talking about primarily nurture issues, attachment disorder, particularly when it comes to radically unstable childhoods and the chronic possibility of abuse, abandonment, neglect, or even just the perception of that.
Right. So let's start with an overview of attachment theory. Attachment theory explains how early relationships with caregivers shape an individual's emotional development, as well as their social behaviors and their ability to form and maintain relationships throughout life. Proposed by John Bowlby, the theory emphasizes the evolutionary role of attachment, the emotional glue between a parent and child, as a mechanism to ensure survival by keeping infants close to their primary caregiver. The quality of this attachment has been shown over the years to profoundly influence the child's emotional well-being and psychological resilience, which goes on to affect major parts of the individual's life as an adult, really in all areas of interpersonal relationships and their view of themselves.
So while there have been enormous contributions to research into attachment theory over the years, the OG pioneers in this area are, as you said, Dr. Shiloh John Bowlby, as well as Mary Ainsworth, Mary Main, Judith Solomon, and Harry Harlow. Each of them used Bowlby's foundation and built on it further to expand the model. This is one of these examples, folks, of what we've talked about many times in the show, of people, we as clinicians would not be able to do our work without unbelievably directed and intense research into particular areas of our field. And this is absolutely one of those times. John Bowlby was a psychodynamic researcher that was trained under Melanie Klein, and he specialized in child psychiatry with training at the Tavistock Clinic in London during the 1930s, where he worked with children and families. Now, Bowlby was able to merge empirical observations with psychoanalytic theory, and that was something that was very new at the time, like taking this kind of amorphous talk therapy theories and ideas and concepts and actually do some real research with it. Okay. And he led to this idea of what's now called attachment theory. He asserted that attachment behaviors like crying or clinging in infants and young children are biologically programmed into humans and animals to keep infants safe. So he proposed 3 different attachment styles.
Yes. So Mary Ainsworth went on to expand Bowlby's theory by developing additional empirical methods to study attachment in infants, most notably the strange situation procedure. If it's at all possible for you to do this, listeners, please take a short break from this podcast and search YouTube for the animated video regarding the strange situation. It isn't necessary for listening to the rest of the show, but it is fascinating. You'll find a link in our show notes. We'll also put in links with actual footage of some of these experiments taking place. So the strange situation is one of those really seminal master's and doctoral level psychology lectures that kind of levels you up in terms of understanding human behavior. If you don't have time today, let me briefly break down what was found. So imagine being a baby.
Okay, already right there with you.
No, not here. Take that up with your therapist.
Oh, noted. Oh, believe me.
Different.
Decades of work in that area. Yes.
Wow, TMI already. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So the strange situation was and continues to be a structured observational study designed to assess attachment styles in infants aged 12 to 18 months. And the study involves a series of 8 short episodes where the infant experiences separations and then reunions with their caregiver in a novel environment. So again, imagine being a baby, just kind of chilling in a room of toys when a sort of friendly, but also sort of suspicious stranger suddenly shows up. And remember, you're a baby, your caregiver then leaves and you're like, wait, what? Where are you going? And then just as you're kind of huffing and squirming and fully considering a total meltdown, your caregiver parent returns, acting calm, collected, like nothing happened. And this situation is carefully repeated with a number of slight differences. So one time the caregiver is directly in the line of sight of the baby as they leave. Another time they kind of slip out of the room when the baby's distracted. Sometimes there are more distractions than others. Sometimes a stranger is seen entering the room, and then other times they just slip in again with the baby completely unaware. So this test is the ultimate, like, who is your safe person and how are you going to react? A little bit of a challenge for those babies. And it measures how they handle caregiver separation, the reunion, and the general awkwardness of stranger danger. So from these experiments, all of which were viewed and filmed through 2-way mirrors, the 3 then what came to be 4 attachment styles emerged. Some babies were seen to be cool throughout the various scenarios, which we now call securely attached. Some babies clearly gave their caregivers the cold shoulder, which is known as avoidant, and others go full dramatic meltdown, which is called ambivalent, although it doesn't really sound ambivalent at all. I think the message is kind of clear.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with any classification set, there are the wild cards. And these would be the babies who freeze or do something totally unpredictable. And we call that disorganized. So, quickly, the three initial categories were secure, insecure avoidant, and insecure ambivalent or resistant, or sometimes it's called anxious, not to be confusing, but I know we're already there. So we'll move on from that. But that's a good encapsulation of how this all stemmed from some pretty famous experiments.
So some very important observations emerge from these studies. Number one, does the infant or toddler use the caregiver as a base for exploration? Secondly, how distressed is that child when the caregiver leaves? And then how does the child infant respond when the caregiver returns? Those are the three things that help give the not diagnosis, but like sort of the observation or the name of an attachment style.
Yeah, helped put them into places them into the categories based on those
Right.
three things. So over the decades, while the strange situation was studied, it has really been shown to have significant predictive power. Researchers have found that attachment styles identified in infancy are shown to often predict future behaviors and relationship patterns. So the infant's ability to regulate emotions during separation and then reunion provides really good insights into the caregiving environment and resulting attachment style. But beyond infants, the variants of the strange situation have been developed to study attachment disorder in older children and even in individuals with disabilities. So we have come to know that follow-ups with participants in Ainsworth studies have shown that early attachment styles can influence adult relationship patterns, mental health, and even parenting styles. Okay, so here's your takeaway from this Psych 101 lesson. These styles are set at such an early age when, frankly, the parents themselves are just emerging into adulthood. So I think that's a consideration.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, in researching that for today's episode, I really want to make the point that as much as I give the OG researchers like all this credit for developing this paradigm, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to the idea of what it meant for parents to be young adults. Because at that age in the 30s, people had children much younger than they do today. And there was a lot of sort of closed consideration of multicultural issues. And I mean, when I say multicultural, I'm also talking about sort of the concentric circles of our family culture, our neighborhood culture, our church culture, all of these things coming to bear. We now have a better understanding that's helping us change our perspective on attachment theory. But anyway, getting back to the 101 lesson, as you were saying, Ainsworth's research inspired both Mary Main and Judith Solomon to dig even further down into what are called the wild cards. And they assert a fourth attachment style that they then named disorganized attachment, as well as going on to devise what we love, of course. We love ways to actually measure things. They devised the adult attachment interview, which is a really valuable tool in assessing attachment patterns in adults. So then Harry Harlow is well known for his experiments with rhesus monkeys. And I'm telling you, I still have not recovered from this video. Did you see it?
I know. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, you guys, it's one of the most important lessons you can learn as a mental health provider, but it's also probably one of the most disturbing, I think, or at least for me personally. So Harlow demonstrated the importance of comfort and care in attachment, showing that infants preferred a soft, comforting mother or parental figure over one that was providing food. Harlow's work marks another key moment in the education of all mental health clinicians, as I said earlier. I don't know of any programs that don't have right on hand the black and white videos of Harlow's heartbreaking experiments with the monkeys. And you can find them as well on YouTube. In short, baby rhesus monkeys were given the option of clinging to one of two wire forms within a cage. Both of those wire forms are in the shapes of mother rhesus monkeys. They're larger, they're monkey shaped, they have large eyes, they have ears. However, one of the wire shapes was completely bare metal, with food available at the chest for the monkey to feed, like a hamster bottle where
Yeah.
the monkey could go to for food. The other shape was covered in a warm, soft, cuddly, furry material, but provided no food. What the experiment found was that the baby monkeys would cling to the warmth of a familiar caregiver over that of the cold metal one, despite the danger of starving to death. And that's also what was found is these baby monkeys actually starved themselves to death because they would not want to leave the warmth of the cuddly mother that was warm
Yeah.
and felt inviting and welcome.
Right. Right. It's like when I ask my daughter if she wants to get out of her warm bed to come eat. She's like, no, I'll just lay
No.
here and watch Grey's Anatomy on my iPad.
Yeah.
I'll just starve.
Oh my God. Your daughter is like the daughter in This Is 40 when she won't stop watching Lost and she's just sobbing all the time because the episodes get sadder and
When
sadder.
they like cut it off from her.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in a nutshell, here's what each attachment style suggests. So in secure attachment, the child feels safe and confident that their caregiver will respond to their needs. The belief here is that these individuals will tend to have healthy relationships, emotional regulation, and high self-esteem. As observed in the strange situation, the infant explores freely, shows distress when caregiver leaves, and seeks comfort upon return, and then often quickly returns to baseline emotional expression, right? So, what you would sort of expect given the situation and is able to regulate. Now, insecure avoidant attachment presents differently. In this style, the child minimizes reliance on the caregiver due to the child's perception or belief of the possibility of rejection or emotional unavailability from the caregiver. The baby avoids or ignores the caregiver and shows little emotional response upon their return, basically indicating that the caregiver can't be relied on. So, like, why am I going to even bother? And then these individuals, as teens and then adults, often struggle with intimacy and may appear emotionally distant.
Then we go on to insecure ambivalent or resistant attachment. And this is where the child exhibits clinginess and difficulty trusting the caregiver's availability. In the strange situation, the child is highly distressed when the caregiver leaves and ambivalent upon their return, seeking comfort, but also resisting it. And while these individuals as teens and adults may display high emotional reactivity, they also can exhibit difficulty trusting others in relationships. Finally, disorganized attachment is observed in the strange situation when the child displays erratic or confused behaviors, like freezing, approaching, or withdrawing from the caregiver. And what research has found is that these children exhibit contradictory behaviors, often stemming from their history of trauma or abuse at this early age. And the terrible factor here is that the caregiver is perceived by the child to simultaneously be a source of comfort and fear. The longitudinal studies show that these individuals are likely to struggle as children and adults with emotional regulation, ideas of self-worth, and then solid or healthy interpersonal relationships. So look, folks, if you're self-diagnosing while listening to this, please just stop. I mean, it's normal. All of us that go into this field are warned not to overdiagnose ourselves. It's kind of like, it's just like a step we all go through, right? But let yourself off the hook for a bit and just kind of take it as a chance to learn about this wacky theory.
Yeah, I think when this comes up, people might necessarily not be diagnosing themselves, but previous people they've been in relationships with. So stop doing that
I
too.
completely support that. I have
kidding.
No problem with that. Diagnose everybody else away. Try
You're
and
like,
avoid family members.
oh, okay, makes sense now. So again, attachment theory posits that early relationships that children have with their caregivers will significantly influence their emotional development and capacity to form healthy relationships. It does not necessarily mean that emotional development in one particular situation will result in the same concrete outcome at all. I mean, there's just way too many factors involved, including the child's level of innate resilience, the child's exposure to higher levels of support from individuals outside the immediate and intimate family dynamic. But it is pretty clear that disruptions in these early attachments can lead to attachment disorders in the most challenging of cases. And with the immense body of literature that includes legitimate research as well as the more lurid portrayals in true crime, we can have a more insightful observation of the backgrounds of certain criminals and serial killers, and hence the reason we're talking about it today. So for fans of true crime, the following abbreviated list will likely hold no surprises, but that makes it a bit easier to look at the factors that we've been discussing. Just as a quick disclaimer here, I want to say we have kind of intermingled, and not interchangeably, but you've probably heard us say both styles and diagnoses so far. Attachment styles are not diagnoses, so there are actually no attachment disorders that formally apply to adults. However, the styles and behaviors exhibited in adulthood can be a result of childhood diagnoses that we are going to cover later in this episode. So just as we move forward, especially with these examples, I just want people to know that these aren't diagnoses that, again, we don't slap labels or diagnoses on folks we haven't evaluated ourselves.
Right. So we're going to talk about the attachment styles of sort of some of the more well-known subjects of true crime for the next few minutes. Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. In regard to attachment issues, Dahmer's mother was reported to be very loving and very sentimental and kept keepsakes from his childhood. However, she was challenged by her own mental health issues, including severe depression. Dahmer's father, a research chemist, was often not in the home, and apparently the birth of a younger brother, who was perceived to be the favorite, only increased family tensions. His parents' eventual divorce, leading to feelings of abandonment and isolation, were likely catalysts for existing attachment issues and Dahmer's underlying nascent psychopathy. That is also something to remember as we talk about these examples. Attachment styles are not the only thing at play here, but they certainly played an important part of the development of the drives that drove these criminals. The research can be conflicting, with some writers talking about the relative normalcy within Dahmer's upbringing, while also commenting that one of his childhood toys was a bucket of animal bones, bleached and dried by both Dahmer and his father as a hobby. Dahmer shared in later interviews that his atrocities against his victims were attempts to keep them from leaving. And that is a drive that would parallel with an insecure, ambivalent, or resistant attachment style. Unstable early attachments may have contributed to his later inability to form healthy relationships and his subsequent choices in participating in his specific type of criminal behavior. Again, there was a lot of other stuff at play, but I think it's very interesting to put this particular lens on these criminals and see how that played a part in the development of their crime style.
Yeah. I mean, with insecure, ambivalent, or resistant, it's really stark to kind of listen to his interviews where he said this was what I did was an attempt to keep them from leaving, right? But in relationships and clients that we work with, I mean, that looks differently, but there's some interesting underlying tones there. It's like the push and pull of like, I hate you, I don't want you to leave me, this back and forth ambivalence. Like, it is ambivalence because it's back and forth so much in terms of what we see when people don't want to end relationships, even if it's toxic, and pulling people back into relationships for the fear of abandonment. It's just really interesting for someone who works with couples at this point to look at these really extreme examples, but then think about, like, how do I see that just play out in the therapy room?
Oh, absolutely. For people that never will come anywhere near committing a crime, there are these drives as well. And I'm sure for some people already, with you saying, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, don't leave me, that kind of thing, most of us in the mental health world would immediately go, well, that sounds like borderline personality disorder. And this is, again, one of those examples where there's just like this fascinating and holographic 3D Venn diagram of different mental health diagnoses and attachment styles or attachment disorders. It all kind of comes together in very interesting ways, but you can't necessarily say that correlation is not causation, but there is an intersection that is always important to look at, especially when we're talking about criminals.
Yeah. You can't just hear one behavior and say, oh, this is that. It could be a few things. Hence the reason Scott and I are throwing around the idea of doing a little part two of how this intersects with personality disorders and psychopathy.
Yeah.
So, but with that, we then have Eileen Wuornos. She was a convicted and executed female killer who murdered 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. Gosh, that sounds so long ago now. She has been labeled as America's first female serial killer, which we obviously know is not true. And in retrospect, her crimes are now understood to be heavily sensationalized by the media. She committed her crimes within a brief time frame under circumstances that she claimed were acts of self-defense against violent clients during her time working as a sex worker. So the media's framing of Wuornos as a serial killer largely relied on gendered stereotypes and sensational narratives, simply painting her as a monstrous anomaly rather than acknowledging the complexities of her abusive background and situational context. This oversimplification ignored really key distinctions that separate serial killing from reactive or situational violence. I will say, I think this oversimplification is made about a lot of serial killers, men included. So this entire episode is probably more about not doing that moving forward more than anything. So in regard to attachment, Wuornos experienced extreme instability in her early life, including her father's incarceration, abandonment by her mother, and left being raised by her grandparents, where she even further suffered sexual abuse and frequent attempts to fend for herself in the woods behind the grandparents' home, where she would flee for safety. The disorganized attachment style seems to be prevalent here, as it is typically associated with a history of severe neglect, abuse, or inconsistent caregiving. Disorganized attachment arises when a caregiver is both a source of comfort and fear. So recall that from when we were talking about that earlier. So you can see how the reported abuse that she suffered at the hands of these now supposed caregivers, her grandparents, likely created this paradoxical dynamic. This really led to profound relational difficulties and an inability to trust others. She was reported to have exhibited intense emotional outbursts, impulsivity, and difficulty forming stable relationships. Disorganized attachment often presents individuals with a marked inability to regulate their emotions due to the unresolved trauma. I think it's fair to assert that Wuornos's relationships were tumultuous and marked by mistrust, possibly the fear of abandonment and erratic behavior of people in her life, and then sort of manifesting in her as well. This pattern often stems from disorganized attachment, where individuals yearn for connection, but really fear closeness due to those early experiences. However, or also, Wuornos may have also exhibited traits of insecure, ambivalent attachment, particularly in her intense need for love and validation that was paired with that fear of rejection. However, the severity in her early trauma and the abusive nature of her caregivers more strongly suggests disorganized attachment style. Disorganized attachment likely played a role in Wuornos's psychological instability and violent actions. I think we can say that. Her difficulty trusting others, coupled with a deep fear of being hurt or abandoned, could have contributed to her extreme reactions to the threats that she perceived in dangerous situations, and then resulted in her taking the lives of these men.
Richard Ramirez was known as the Night Stalker and convicted of 13 murders and numerous other assault and property crimes committed in California during 1984 and 1985. While there's not a great deal of information on his developmental periods during his infancy and toddler years, it is pretty clear that his descent into criminality was profoundly shaped by a radically unstable and abusive upbringing. He was born in El Paso, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 children to Mexican immigrants. His father, a former Juarez police officer, was prone to violent outbursts, frequently subjecting his children to physical abuse. It is known and confirmed that Ramirez suffered multiple head injuries at a young age, one of which resulted in a diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy. Now, by the age of 10, he was exposed to the use of drugs and began his own path of experimentation, much too young to understand the ramifications, marking the start of a lifelong struggle with substance abuse. Ramirez gravitated to a pivotal influence during his formative years that at first appeared to be a stable influence, and that was his cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez. And Mike was a decorated Vietnam War veteran. Mike fascinated the young Richard Ramirez with inappropriate and floridly gruesome tales of torture and violence that Mike claimed to have inflicted upon Vietnamese women, often accompanied by photographic evidence of those atrocities. It's believed that this exposure to violence and sexually oriented material at such a young age, in tandem with chronic drug use and likely with temporal lobe epilepsy, had a major impact on desensitizing Ramirez towards cruelty. Again, all while under the influence and care of what he believed to be the one stable relationship that he had. And when Richard was 13 years old, he witnessed Mike fatally shoot his wife during a domestic dispute. This event clearly had a lasting impact on the child's development, further cementing a fascination with violence. Following the incident, Richard's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He withdrew from his family, delved deeper into substance use, and developed an interest in the occult and allegedly into Satanism, leading to sort of a perspective on an attachment style as disorganized based on the expression of violence.
So Ted Bundy was a man who confessed to 30 homicides across several states during the 1970s. In the abundant material available about Bundy's upbringing, he too was reported to have experienced a confusing and unstable early family environment, including being raised by his grandparents under the pretense that they were his parents and his mother was his sister. The context of the time is necessary, as this type of familial deceit was not, well, terribly uncommon, but definitely not discussed and generally shrouded in a lot of shame. His behaviors grew more erratic through his toddler years, with his aunt sharing years later an incident where she woke up to find 3-year-old Ted standing by the bed, smiling at her, and the multiple knives that he had surrounded her with. Bundy later indicated that he had harbored resentment towards his mother and grandparents for concealing the truth. As a teenager, Bundy had significant challenges in social interactions, describing himself as unable to understand interpersonal relationships, although the media has portrayed him as this charming and seductive man. And I think that's really interesting, like being unable to understand interpersonal relationships. Like, it's such a clinical, stark way of describing it, but I think says a lot.
Really does.
Yeah.
Or as much as it says, I think it opens the door to so many other questions that are diagnostic in nature. And again, we just have to piece through all the media bullshit about it, right?
Exactly. But yeah, you take a quote like that, and again, like, not to compare ourselves, but someone like you and I would be like, man, I just don't feel what other people feel when they're like in love. And he's just like, yes, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
What is this thing you people are doing? So Bundy's behaviors from childhood, characterized by a combination of things like fear, confusion, and contradictory behaviors in relationships. Again, we're going to posit that points to a disorganized attachment style for this man.
Henry Lee Lucas was a convicted serial killer who claimed to have murdered hundreds of victims, though only a handful were confirmed. And there remains to this day a great deal of controversy about the really poor investigative work done by law enforcement across the country, because so many law enforcement agencies were eager to pin their unsolved crimes on him. And he willingly went along with it because he was getting reinforced with cigarettes and chocolate malts and, the treats that he got from the local restaurants. Born in 1936 in then rural Blacksburg, Virginia, Lucas is reported to have experienced a childhood that was challenged by abuse, neglect, and trauma. He was raised by his abusive mother, Viola Lucas, and his largely incapacitated father, Anderson Lucas. He endured relentless physical and emotional harm at the hands of his mother. Viola frequently subjected him to brutal beatings, including one incident where he struck him with a wooden plank, causing a traumatic brain injury that resulted in a 3-day coma. Viola is reported to also have forced Henry to witness her engaging in sex work, while his father, a double amputee and full-blown chronic alcoholic, was unable to provide any kind of protection or emotional support. Neglect was pervasive. For instance, Lucas lost an eye due to an untreated injury inflicted by his brother. Lucas's upbringing likely led to a disorganized attachment style, which again is characterized by a simultaneous need and fear of caregivers. This attachment style typically arises in environments where caregivers are sources of both comfort and threat. And I would also say, in wrapping up this little section about examples, that disorganized attachment styles or ambivalent attachment styles do not mean that you're going to grow up to be a criminal. It's just a factor that is apparently common in some of the most prolific killers that we've seen. So again, correlation is not causation. We're just pointing out some very interesting factors about upbringing and how some of these events may have been the lit match that is thrown on the pile of gasoline-soaked logs.
Yeah, we're looking backwards. I mean, both Dr. Scott and I work with everyday people who have insecure attachment styles. I mean, when you just look at the general population, about 50 to 60% of people have a secure attachment style. So we're looking at half the population, 40% to half the population who do not. So we're not wanting to pathologize. We're merely just setting a foundation.
No, in fact, let me tell on myself as someone who has been in therapy for literally decades. And I have been using treatment modalities sort of across the spectrum. I've used eclectic modalities. I've, like gone all in on attachment styles. I've gone all in on object relations, that kind of thing. I understand now that I have a lot of that insecure, avoidant attachment stuff going on. And it gets very complex for us as individuals, especially if you do a lot of inner work, if you journal, if you go to therapy, if you do this kind of mindful observation of your own challenges. It's all about context, because on one hand, I can tell someone that's sitting across from me in my room, I can say, well, you know what? You had a really great boundary with this relationship. You saw this relationship as toxic and you removed yourself from that. And that is really good. Now, that's a possibility. The other possibility is that this is a person that really can't tolerate any kind of conflict in a relationship, and they immediately shut down and they leave the relationship. I myself have been that person, and learning sort of distress tolerance skills has been a big challenge for me. Mm-hmm. So the boundary thing worked for me for years. It's like, yep, you're a piece of crap. I'm done. And now I have a much more, I would say, balanced and nuanced view of relationships that's probably more healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to a place where you didn't have to cut it
oversharing there, but
exactly. Thank you for the self-disclosure.
Right.
No, I mean, I kind of love that we're starting out with something like so psychobabbly for the first episode of the year, because it's an example how a lot of the time what we do on this show is we take a topic or phenomenon or disorder and we look backwards through that lens at criminal behavior, but it's not the be-all explanation of everything. And if we kind of talked in the middle of all of these Venn diagrams that we have built on top of each other for 7 years, I wouldn't be able to understand any of it. It would just, so it's very intentional to take these topics, look backwards, and then always say, but this isn't everything, right? There's so many other factors. So with that, there's still plenty of research and theoretical support for inspecting where these intersections of insecure attachment styles and childhood trauma overlap when we're looking backwards at a serial killer's life. Abuse and neglect in early childhood are common themes in the backgrounds of many serial killers, and many serial killers have histories of severe childhood trauma, which again can shape personality and then contribute to the development of mental health issues and ways in which they view other people. And then, sort of separately from that theory, is how attachment theory is conceptualized in criminology, where the research indicates that insecure attachment styles, often resulting from early abuse or neglect, are prevalent among criminal offenders. Individuals with anxious ambivalent or anxious avoidant attachment styles may struggle with emotional regulation, impulse control, and empathy, all factors that we absolutely look at when we're trying to look at recidivism of criminal behavior, or maybe what led up to that first time of them engaging in criminal behavior. So those are like really concrete things that can be documented and measured in the history of someone who's engaging in those acts. And then lastly, there is research that supports a nexus with attachment disorders and criminal behavior. Again, as we move into talking about attachment disorders, it's important to note that while these disorders can be a contributing factor, again, they don't determine criminal behavior just on their own. We need to continually think about a combination of genetics, environment, and the other psychological factors that typically influence such outcomes.
So a lot to think about, folks. Again, it's a heady psychobabble episode with some concrete examples of a concept that many people have requested over the last few years. We're going to wrap this up because we're already pushing an hour. We're going to wrap this up as part 1 of this episode, but do not stress out. We're not going to make you wait another entire week for an episode. We're going to do something that we really haven't done before. I think maybe we've done it once before. Maybe. It's hard to remember at this point. But what we're going to do is we're going to drop part 2, which is another full hour, tomorrow.
Yep.
So again, it'll just download regularly like you always get your episodes, but then we'll be digging down further into specific attachment styles that actually do turn into attachment disorders.
Yep. So we will see you guys tomorrow on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, guys.
We'll be right back, folks. Bye.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
Our theme music, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons Attribution license. Please check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on X at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Once a month, we go live on YouTube on Saturday afternoon. So pay attention to our social media announcements to join our interactive broadcast entitled Behind the Couch, where we interview guests on a number of psych, criminal justice, and true crime topics.
And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, additional content, host interaction, and you'll be the first to know about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.